people, never look at the camera.
Okay, gotcha.
So, hey Carson, where are we today?
Hey, Ernie. So, we are in the offices of Daniel Lehenbauer and Kurt Berglund. And I'm very excited to be here because it was, what, 2 years ago, Daniel, that I was in this very office and WPF was just a flicker in people's imagination. And I came in and we did an interview and you showed some of the very initial 3D work in WPF. And now here we are 2 years later. You guys have shipped. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, that's very exciting. And you have something new to show us as far as WPF 3D.
Yep.
So do you want to talk about what that is?
Sure. So one of the things that's always been a goal of our platform is to create this seamless integration between all the components in the platform. So features like data binding work in 3D and animation works in 3D, and just, fundamental things too, like remoting and printing. It's just a huge set of services. One of the things that's always been kind of a challenge is that while we have the ability to take 2D images and even live stuff, animated, data-bound stuff, and put it on a 3D surface, we've never been able to interact with it. And so, fortunately, we recently hired Kurt. He's how long have you been with us, by the way?
I guess I did 2 internships here,
Okay.
and this is my going on 4th month or so, I think. So,
Yeah. So for the last 4 months, then Kurt's been investigating what it would take to get interactivity working, and he's been doing that on top of our V1 bits, which is the most exciting part of this. And so, what he's going to be showing you here is stuff that we actually plan to release to the community, and kind of solve this problem.
Very, very cool. Do you want
Yes.
any other introductory material?
No, I think that's it. I guess we'll get to more specifics later, but I guess we'll just get started. We'll show you the kind of the cool demo here.
Okay.
So.
I like demos.
So this is a demo of all the stuff of what we built on top of the 2D on 3D code. So just as to get started, so we talked to the Flickr API to get all of our images, and then in addition, everything that you see is 2D on 3D. And so here you go. So I'll show you. We start up and running, and so it's starting up, and now it's pulling sort of my photos from Flickr, and so I sort of seeded it with different ones, and you'll see. And so like I said, so all this is 2D on 3D. So there are kind of these 3D things and this carousel that's going around the screen and kind of this circular halo. And so you kind of see the photos come through. So I can kind of click on it and it pops up. And then the neat thing is this is also 2D on 3D. So when I move over it, we have the various buttons. So there's comments on this photo, there's geotagging information, maybe I want to blog it. I'll show this later, and then a close button. But the thing that we want to do is we want to make this just like a photo. So I can kind of start scrolling around. And you kind of see there's a specular highlight, so it gives it that glossy feel like a real photograph.
You'd probably actually see that better if you pull up a more colorful photo.
Okay, so let me go. Let's get one of these leaf ones. So you kind of see
It's
that specular highlight. So just like a real photo, and then when you kind of pull it on the back, nobody's commented on this photo, but if they did, they'd kind of go on the back of the photo like a real photograph, and I could type, I think this picture looks great. And so I'm typing on a 3D object. And I can kind of flip it back around, close that down, and then let me just go back here. The scroll bar is also a 2D on 3D thing. So a picture where I know I already commented on it. So you can see it has comments. I'll flip it around and sort of grapes from one country. So, it's all pulling all this stuff from Flickr, sort of restricting to our photos just for make sure that we don't show something that we shouldn't. But the other cool thing too is that, with the Flickr API, we can get kind of neat information. So there's this geo button, and then some things show geo information. So we'll pop up this sphere, and then I can move this around. So this is 2D on 3D. And then these little, I'm not much of a designer, but these are my attempt at a push pin. So you can see this is kind of my adventures around the world. So I stayed in Germany for a little bit, popped that around. Here's a picture of a train in Leipzig, Germany. Go back here, sort of my hometown. There's Cleveland, Ohio in the winter, so a little bit better than Seattle.
So can you show the drag select on that globe?
Sure, yeah. And then the other cool thing is too, is that we actually made a really simple 2D visual. So it's just a picture of the globe, and then when you click on it and you drag, it's just a 2D visual doing this simple selection. But when you put it on 3D, I get this real sort of simple way, but very powerful, to select a region of the country, and then I can right-click and then I can search within that region.
So if you didn't catch that, that's actually a context menu that's owned by the 2D visual that's wrapped around the globe.
Yeah.
Right.
And we actually have the ability to figure out where that context menu should pop up at the top level relative to the globe. And so this might be deviating from your script a little bit, Kurt, but could you show the source or the XAML for the globe?
So let me close this down, and then go into the VS project, and then so we just want to look at the map visual. And so I mean, let me open it in Cider, even better. And give it a second to load up. But it should be coming. But I mean, it's pretty much just this like this 2D image of the goalpost. So here it is. I mean, there's not a whole lot going down. You can see in the XAML, pretty much I'm just putting an image and the image source, and then here's that context menu that pops up. And then where all the kind of 2D magic happens is that I'm just looking for when the mouse left button goes down, and then when it moves, I'm kind of drawing that rectangle. So it's very simple to make, basic 2D control. You throw it on that 3D globe, and all of a sudden you have all sorts of different ways to interact.
Right.
And so,
so the thing that's phenomenally cool about that is that the code that he's writing here for this map visual has no idea that's on a 3D surface.
Yeah.
Like the entire time, all the math he's doing, the layout, everything, that's all just pure 2D code.
Right.
And I mean, you could use it in 2D the way it is, or you can throw it on a 3D surface and it works exactly the same.
yeah. So I guess we can go back to the globe. So you can see here comes the geo, and then as photos come in, they'll start putting push pins on the map where you'll see, I guess I didn't geotag this one, but just to prove that this all is live 3D, right? I'm moving the slider to adjust the curvature of that photo, so he goes back and forth. So we think that's pretty cool. And then the even greater thing is, I guess these things too. I mean, these are all just one 2D visual. But let's show you an example. So some of the cool stuff that also works is that I'll do it this way. So I can type text into the box, but also I can drag and drop. I can drag and drop text. So that's dragging and dropping between two 3D visuals. Which is pretty cool. And then this is pure sort of a demo effect, but the trick is that this whole time we have actually not been interacting with 2D, but we've been interacting with 2D on 3D on 2D on 3D. And so this original plane is just a line. It's just a mesh. It's just a rectangle in 3D aligned so that it fills up the whole screen.
Right.
But we can put it on a cube, and then I can click this picture, and this one pops up. You can see we still got all these animation effects.
Right.
Put on this little torus. Do this one where it blows up. Right. So all sorts of different things.
Nice.
So I don't think this is sort of practical for real world, but
well,
it makes for a neat effect.
It's a huge, exciting feature for the platform because everybody was asking for this in V1, and we had to say, oh no, we couldn't do it. And people have tried to work around it where they're in 3D and suddenly they snap to 2D. The healthcare demo does that, for example.
Yeah.
Or people have done lots of complicated hit testing on their 2D, on the 3D to sort of fake it.
Yeah, it requires a lot of math to try to do that swapping back and forth. So you have to get it all aligned just perfectly to make the transition look right.
Exactly.
So it's so much nicer if you can just stick in one world and do all of your work in one space. So, yeah.
Okay.
And I think that was all.
We want to definitely talk about some of the more geeky things, how it works. So
all right, so we also prepared sort of a live coding demo for you.
Yeah, so this will demonstrate just how easy it is to make your 3D things interactive.
So here's my Channel 9 demo. And so a lot of this stuff we've sort of just put into the resources section to cut down on how much code we're showing in the demo, but it's all pretty simple. So just to get started, so we're just going to start with a basic 2D app, sort of rich content. We just put two things in a grid, as you can see here. One visual goes on the left, one goes on the right. I'll run it just so you can see what that looks like. So this is my attempt at making a rich app. So on the left here is it's sort of like the output of this graph thing that we're making. And so I'll data bind these sliders to the height of a rectangle, and sort of they make these graphs. And then just for fun too, we'll my bar graph, just to do those things. And then just to show that all sorts of these controls work, we're not doing this on a tablet PC, but we're going to put an ink canvas on top of this thing so that I can actually draw stuff. So, here's my drawing with the mouse. And so the goal of this is we're going to take this and we're going to say, you know what, this is super rich experience, right? But we want to make it even richer, so we're going to put it in 3D, right? And then by the end, we'll actually be interacting with this sort of on 3D.
Okay.
So there's sort of the basic thing.
Do it.
All right, so I guess it's like a cooking show. We already put some of the stuff here, just the basics, and then we'll finish it off. So come down here, and we're going to start by just making the 3D sort of template or framework for what we're going to do.
Yeah, so that's just a camera there, right, for the first 3 lines.
Right. So we just have a simple camera where we're going to put our position slightly off the origin, and then all this down here is simply us just putting one light in the screen so that in the scene so that we can actually see what it is. So
you just have an empty 3D scene there, right?
correct. Right. So now we want to add some stuff to our 3D scene. So we're going to start with the model visual 3D, and then we're going to transform it by a transform that we've already placed in the scene. And so on top of that, we're going to need to put something, the mesh that the model visual 3D will actually be displaying. It's a geometry model 3D, where the geometry is a static resource plane mesh. So we're just a simple 2D plane in 3D, or a rectangle, I guess. And then the material is another just resource we've already defined, which is material 1, which is sort of the classic way to do kind of 2D on 3D, where you don't have that interaction with it, where we're just putting that visual 1 on top of a visual brush, and then it's on that material.
Yeah, so that material is a visual brush, which is pointing to the visual that you had in the simple 2D.
Yeah, so
Standard stuff.
Yeah, so I can show it up here. So it's just, here's material 1, and it's a diffuse material, and its brush is just the visual brush pointing to that left visual.
Yep. I'm with you.
And so we're going to do the same thing, but we're kind of mirror it so it looks like this. And so we're going to put, so everything changes to a 2, so transform 2, same mesh, and then the second material, which is the second picture. So let me start and run this. Then we'll run it. And so there we go. Okay, 2D on 3D. But the problem is, I'm trying to click around here. I can't. I can't scroll anything. Yeah, it's like it's so really easy for me to take this 2D content and just throw it on a 3D scene. But now I want to click the buttons. I want to move things around, but unfortunately can't do it.
And we all said, wait till V2.
Wait till V2. Yeah.
That was this answer we gave everybody.
Yeah, and then sort of in the interim of shipping and getting ready for the next stuff, I kind of looked at what was there, and then we saw that there was. I don't know if I want to call it a trick, but there was a way to do it with current stuff. So here's how it is. It's going to be pretty simple. So the first step, so say you already have your Viewport 3D set up and you want to make this interactive. So the first thing you do, so local is our own private namespace, and you want to add the interactive 3D decorator. And you want to put that around your Viewport 3D. So so spacing works, let me do that. And so all that's doing is sort of setting up the infrastructure so that this 2D on 3D interaction can happen.
Okay.
So that's the first step. And the second step is that to sort of tip off the interactive 3D decorator, that there is 3D that you want to interact with. What we're going to add, what we need to change is that the model visual 3Ds that we want to interact with become interactive visual 3Ds.
Okay.
And so what interactive visual 3D does is, so we're going to, it's more or less just like a model visual 3D, except we expose a couple of dependency properties that make life a little bit easier to do stuff. So transform will stay the same. So we want to tell it what the geometry is that it's going to be drawing. So we're going to use that plane mesh from before. And then let me go down so it all fits on screen. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to tell it what the visual is that it's going to put onto this surface, on this 3D thing, and make interactive. And so this is just our static resource, our visual 1. So we tap that off, and then that's all we need. So that sort of goes and takes away.
So there's no longer the sense of a material. It's now just a visual.
The material and all that is there.
It's there.
But just we thought sort of for ease of use, this way is kind of nice, where you're just going to you can tell it the geometry you want to draw, and then the visual that you want on top of that geometry, and then it's going to go behind the scenes and set up the materials and all that for you.
I see.
So And then so to do the second one, just like before. So we're going to do the same thing. So I just copied and pasted this. And then I'm going to change that transform 1 to 2 so it's in the right spot. And visual 1 to visual 2 so it's in the right spot. And then now we have interactive 3D. So let me rebuild. And it worked. And let me start it up. And so now you can see I move the mouse and it's changing the ink canvas. I come over here and I drag it and I go up and down, right? And so this is all 2D on 3D, and the data binding is all there and working. So I can do this again. And then come over here, and then I can draw on 3D too. So
That's great.
it'd be nice if I had the tablet.
All right.
Yeah. So, can you prove that this is really 3D now?
Yeah, so now, in case there are skeptics that we're just playing, render transforms behind the scenes because we're kind of high, we're not showing. What we're going to do is, another thing that will probably come out with all this is that we've taken the trackball that's been out before, and we made it into just a plain old XAML tag, so I can put
Oh, okay.
a trackball around my viewport 3D. And so this will let us actually move it around and interact with it. So we start that up. And now to prove it's 3D, we have that trackball, so now I can move it around and rotate it. And
Nice.
then I can still draw. Put it at some weird perspective. And I can click and I can move this thing, right? So there's some text on the display.
That's fantastic.
And then just for fun, we'll just we'll highlight that way. Right.
It's not usually the direction you highlight text, but
Yeah. And then even if we're off the mesh, it still works too, which is something we're pretty proud of.
Oh, right.
or you can be outside the window.
Yeah, you can be outside the window, and then there you go. So
Very cool.
there you go. But yeah, just throw it on there, and then anything will work. So buttons, text, drag and drop, it all goes. And so that's sort of the demo. So that's how simple it is potentially.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the trick?
So what's the trick? Okay, yeah. So I guess now most people probably want to know, how exactly we did this.
Right.
And so there are two parts to sort of the basic doing 2D on 3D. And so one is fairly simple, and the second one requires a little bit more of, I guess, outside the box thinking.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, it's simple with all the stuff that's in V1 to sort of shoot a ray into the 3D scene.
Yes.
See what you hit, and then based on what you hit, compute the texture coordinate that you hit.
Right.
And so with that texture coordinate, you can sort of map back and say, this is where I hit on that visual that was on my 3D scene.
Right.
So that part is fairly simply done, easily understood. But the hard part is getting the input to work. So, the initial thought is, okay, I'm going to hit, I'll move the mouse around when the person clicks. I'm going to shoot a ray into the scene. I'm going to see what it hit. I'm going to do this intersection testing. I'll figure out what I hit on my 2D object, and then I'm going to fake the input through. Now, the problem is, you can't fake input.
Well, there's good reasons for that.
Yeah, there's good reasons.
Security,
Yeah, security reasons, but you can't fake input. So it's a little bit more difficult. So what we did, so I can show it with this too. I put my debug flag to be true. And so what we do really is, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but if you can kind of see, there's this ghosted image before.
Mm-hmm.
So really what that interactive 3D decorator does is it puts a sort of a hidden layer of glass on top of your viewport 3D. And on top of that hidden layer, it's taking whatever visual you're currently over on your 3D scene, and it's overlaying it on that layer of glass. And it's doing it such that whenever the mouse moves, and it's hit testing, and then so that the point that the mouse is over on that 3D scene is the same point the mouse is over on that hidden layer of glass, which is that visual that it's over.
Uh-huh.
And so
like it's really easy to see as you touch this the different sliders on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
let's see.
Like for example, if you move to the slider, let's say the leftmost slider, as you go down there, you'll see that the ghosted 2D image is also moving to that slider.
Mm-hmm.
And so the same points in the right place for both.
Right. And so the nice thing is that then, so we track these mouse moves,
Mm-hmm.
and we use these mouse moves so that we put that hidden layer in the right spot. And now when you click, there's no work that needs to be done. Because really, the whole time you're interacting with 2D. But it's using that V1 of Avalon where it just kind of takes the image, the current image, and it puts it on that 3D surface, and it puts it behind the scenes. And then when we turn off that hidden layer, for a user, they have no idea that really we're just faking and they're interacting with 2D, which then gets mapped onto 3D. But to them, it looks like they're interacting with 3D.
Right.
So Kurt came up with this technique, and ever since he's thought of it, we just keep thinking of new things like, oh, I wonder if drag and drop will work, and it just happens to work, and so it's been a fun discovery process for us.
Yeah.
Right.
Or too, because I mean, really, we only track one event. I mean, there's no. I think that's, sometimes people are like, oh, this is a total hack, but it's nice because we just track this one event, and then everything comes out based on that event. So I can start tabbing around, but because I'm on that control. Tabbing just works, so you can see I'll go down here and then I'll start using the keyboard to move things up.
So you're just getting that all for free.
Yeah, getting it all for free without any sort of effort.
Right. So you don't explicitly listen for
No, for text inputs, nothing like that. Yeah, just simply preview mouse move and then put everything in order. Drag and drop is a little bit more of a special trick, but
yeah, and something that's maybe worth mentioning is that this really isn't too far from the ideal implementation, because we're using the hit testing infrastructure and all kinds of features of the platform. We're just a little bit creative with how we make the actual input events work out. So
yeah,
right.
And so highlighting that, and then I guess just showing it kind of in operation too. I'll go back to the original demo where it's gonna load up. But I'll show you on the original, the Flickr demo, that all this 2D and 3D is happening as well. Oh, sorry, I'll slow down. Okay. So let's run it. So I have my handy truth button here, and then you can see as I move the mouse around, there's little sort of ghost images. Where if I pull one up, you can see the real thing. So the cool thing is that this whole control is really just one. 2D thing where the image is on the left and then the text and comments are on the right, and then the 3D kind of wraps around so that it works. But you can see the second part of it's right here too. Over here, all these little buttons.
Yeah, so
nice.
That's amazingly cool. Did you have more to show, Kurt?
Oh wait, I'll show this in a sec.
Okay.
So I'll go back to the other one just because it makes it easier. The blue stuff that you saw is normal. So I guess the really tricky thing is that when you're moving the mouse around, life is nice when you're over that 3D thing because you hit test down, you're still in the mesh, you know exactly where you are. But the problem is when I do something like here's some text that I'm typing, and then I highlight some of it, I move off, and then this thing has capture, so everything event goes to this, but I no longer have any context of where I am. And so the way we get around this is that, I don't know if you can see, well, I can move down. So I'm just using the trackball to get everything out of the way. But you can see there's this blue outline. And so what this blue outline is just sort of, my information to know. It's the outline in 2D of the projection of that 2D stuff on 3D. And so what we then do is, when the mouse moves off it, we compute that outline, and then we look for whatever the closest point on that outline is to the mouse, and then we sort of snap it to that. And so the nice thing is that then, text works like you want it to. So when I move down, it's going back and forth just like what I want.
Right, right.
Or, I'm not on the thing anymore. You can see on the bottom here, it goes back and forth as I go down.
Yeah, it's kind of a small detail, but this is actually probably technically the most challenging part of making this work.
Yeah.
So this is where the infrastructure that we've built with like hit testing and everything doesn't work anymore, because when you fire this right into space, it hits nothing. So it's kind of like, oh, well, what should the behavior be then?
Yeah.
And so what he's done here is he's turned it into a 2D problem, which is pretty neat by projecting the geometry and just saying we're closest in 2D to this part of the rectangle. So it's kind of a human approach to it. As a human, you look at it, and that's where you think it would go because you see it in 2D on the screen. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. Very, very interesting. Because what will people do with this? That's the question I have. When you give someone a platform, and then they can, designers, developers, people are gonna come up with UIs. People have been wanting this for years. In academia, in all sorts of environments, people have thought, well, what if I had, and now we're giving people the capability to do it without that high of a bar of entry, really.
Right. Yeah, just add interactive a couple places in your XAML and it just works.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I think
thoughts?
I think it'll be interesting to see what what a real designer, what somebody with a good art background did. So
Yeah.
like the media browser was sort of it was like a week and a half project, I'd say. So.
Oh, that's the Flickr thing.
Yeah,
you're showing earlier.
the Flickr
Yeah.
thing. So if someone more time, more artistic,
Sure.
integrity than I have, could really do, I think, some really neat stuff. So, or even just developers. Right?
I have to ask performance.
Mm-hmm.
What are the performance implications of, just 3D has implications of performance. Visual brushes on 3D
Right.
have implications of performance. Now we add yet another
Right.
layer on top of this. Are there
Yeah.
recommendations? Are there gotchas? Are there...
Well, the visual brush is kind of the gating factor. So if you're already doing a technique like this using visual brushes, adding the interactive tags in front of it really doesn't dramatically
really?
change the performance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's not much different than what you'd already have to do.
okay, so...
So yeah, I'd sort of say performance-wise, from what we've seen, if you're going to make the scene and put all these visual brushes in it, and it's going to be slow, then of course we're going to be slow. And then the second thing is if you can't afford the hit test per mouse move, then it's going to be slow too. But if both those things are okay, then it should be no real impact.
Plus, hit testing is on by default, so just today when you mouse over a scene, unless you've explicitly turned it off for performance reasons to prevent glitching in the animation, then you're already paying that price, and so again, this won't change it.
I see. Okay. So it's really more just using visual brushes in 3D in the first place. This isn't, that's good to hear. So this isn't that much of a cost over
Right.
the
Yeah.
base visual brush 3D
Yep.
infrastructure.
And
Fantastic.
he's got a fairly large number of visual brushes in that particular example.
Yeah.
Because each tile that's in that scene is an
A visual
individual
brush.
model visual 3D using a visual brush,
Right.
which is far more than you traditionally need to display UIs. Before we're using 2 of them total when we had the 2 panels. So.
Although you guys did some optimization sort of late in the game around visual brushes in
Yeah.
3D.
So if you look at the rendering options class, there's a few properties that we hit because they're a little bit experimental. But one of them was a caching hint, I think, and so you can turn that on, and it will actually buffer visual brushes in memory, so you don't have to re-rasterize them as often. And so if you experiment with those parameters, you can usually tweak a little more performance out of visual brushes.
Now say that again. They're hidden, but they're available. So this
Well,
is-
they're attached properties. So
They're
if
attached
you go to
properties.
Visual Brush, the class, you won't see it. You have to go to Rendering Options, which is a static class, which has a set of properties, one of which you can set on a visual brush, which is a little bit confusing, but the perf team's all over that, and they've got documents out with samples, so it's pretty easy to find. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Great. Well, thanks a lot,
Yeah,
guys.
great.
It's
Yeah, thank you.
fantastic.